Before I hit record today, I just sat there for a second staring at everything coming out around the 49ers because some weeks feel like ordinary offseason noise and some weeks feel like a warning siren. And to me, this was a warning siren kind of week. When you start seeing signs that point to help in the trenches, more support in the run game, fresh possibilities that could change the weight of this defense, and a real decision hanging over key pieces of the roster, that signal is way too loud to ignore. This does not feel like a team getting comfortable. This feels like a franchise hearing the clock on its championship window, feeling the heat from the faithful, and understanding that a real contender cannot afford to keep missing. If you're living through that pressure with Niner Nation, lock in, subscribe, and stay with me. And the first place this hits hardest to me is the offensive line. Because that all-SEC mock draft is not just a fun little exercise. The real story is what it says underneath the surface. And what it says is loud. If the 49ers really want to stay in this title chase, they have to stop kicking this problem down the road. At number 27, the projection was Monroe Freeling out of Georgia. And what jumps off the page here is not that he is some flawless, plug-and-play finished product. It is that he has the strength, movement, and upside to become a major answer. A guy who could start inside, maybe at guard, learn from Trent Williams, and eventually take on something even bigger. That matters. That is a front office thinking about today without taking its eyes off tomorrow. And for the Niners, that balance is everything right now, because protecting the present while preparing for life after Trent is exactly what a serious franchise is supposed to do. Then at number 58, the mock doubles down with Jake Slaughter from Florida, a center guard who allowed just one sack and brings leadership and versatility to the table. And that is the part that really sticks with me. When two of your biggest projected investments go straight into the offensive line, that is not random. That is a diagnosis. That is a giant neon sign screaming that this offense cannot keep relying on scheme, motion, and playmakers to paper over cracks in protection and weakness on the interior. After that, the mock adds more depth with Keyron Crawford on the edge, Julian Neal in the secondary, Harrison Wallace III at receiver, and Michael Taff at safety. There are interesting names there, absolutely. Neal stands out with his size, production at Arkansas, and local ties to San Francisco. Taff brings versatility and football IQ. Crawford gives you rotational pass rush juice. But let's be honest, the heartbeat of this whole projection is still the trenches. Because a contender trying to climb back to the top of the NFC cannot play games with pass protection. It cannot treat the post-Trent Williams future like some tiny side issue. And it cannot keep pretending the interior line is already solved. This mock does not confirm anything, obviously. This is projection, not proof. But when even a mock starts hammering the exact sore spot on your roster, the question stops being, do the Niners see this? And becomes something a lot more uncomfortable. Are they actually going to attack it with the urgency this window demands? And that is where the conversation shifts. Because one thing is building for the future up front. Another thing entirely is looking at a market opportunity that could help this team right now. And that is exactly why the Najee Harris buzz is starting to make noise around the 49ers. First things first, let's separate fact from projection. There is no official confirmation of talks with San Francisco right now. That matters. But the context is real, and that context is exactly what gives this rumor real life. Najee is still unsigned, still taking visits, and his name is still floating around the league among teams looking for help in the run game. The material mentions a visit with the Seahawks and another lined up with the Raiders. So this is not some made-up rumor pulled out of thin air. This is a veteran back still moving through the market while the 49ers have a need their own head coach already put on the table. And that is the part that carries real weight. When Kyle Shanahan says Christian McCaffrey needs help, that changes the whole discussion. At that point, it stops sounding like fan paranoia and starts sounding like a real roster issue. From there, any veteran running back with experience, physicality, and the ability to carry a real workload naturally becomes relevant in this orbit. And Najee fits that conversation for one very simple reason. He gives the backfield a different kind of hammer behind McCaffrey. He is a physical runner, a volume runner, a guy who can handle contact, grind inside, absorb punishment, and take some of that burden off the star of your offense. And for a contender, that is not a luxury item. That is survival. Because if the Niners want to still be standing when the season gets brutal, protecting McCaffrey is not optional. It is mandatory. Now, does this come without risk? No. The health question is real. The material notes that NBC Sports highlighted his recovery from the Achilles injury he suffered last season, even though recent videos showed him running at full speed again. So there is absolutely some risk baked in here. But that is also where opportunity can sneak through the back door. If the market cools, the price drops. And when the price drops, smart contenders start paying even closer attention. That is why this rumor does not feel empty. Not because a deal is close, but because the football logic is there. The need is there. The fit is there. The timing is there. And when those pieces start drifting into the same orbit, the real question is no longer whether the name makes sense in Santa Clara. The real question is whether the 49ers will stay patient or get aggressive before somebody else sees the same opening. And then the temperature jumps again, because now we are not talking about depth or support. Now we are talking about a possibility that could change the whole look and feel of the defense. Kayvon Thibodeaux has popped back up in trade rumors involving the New York Giants, and the material points to Alex K from Bleacher Report, suggesting New York could consider moving him during the April 2026 draft. That is not a report of an active deal. Let's keep that line clean. But it is not baseless chatter either, because there is real context behind it. The Giants already have Brian Burns and Abdul Carter lined up as their starting edge rushers. Thibodeaux is heading into the final year of his rookie deal, and he is coming off a disappointing 2025 season filled with injuries and inconsistency. And that is where the 49ers suddenly become a fascinating fit. Because if there is a team that makes sense trying to unlock the best version of a talented pass rusher, it is San Francisco. Put Thibodeaux next to Nick Bosa, and the entire defense gets heavier overnight. Not just because of the name, but because of the ripple effect. Because of the pressure that creates on opposing protections. Because of the fear a duo like that plants in an offense before the ball is even snapped. Now, yes, there is real risk here. He is not coming in at peak value. He is not coming off a clean, dominant season. And he cannot be sold like a guaranteed fix. But that is also exactly why this kind of door can crack open in the first place. When the value drops, aggressive contenders start thinking differently. And that is why this rumor messes with the heads of Niners fans in the best and worst way. Because if there really is a window here, then San Francisco has to decide what kind of franchise it wants to be. One that keeps patching around the edges? Or one that attacks its own championship window like it actually believes the moment is now? And then there is one more layer to all of this that says a lot about where the 49ers really are. Because not every piece of contender pressure shows up in a shiny arrival. Sometimes it shows up in how a franchise manages a possible exit. Sometimes it shows up in how it tries to salvage value from a situation that looked dead in the water. And that is exactly what the Brandon Aiyuk situation is starting to reveal. For most of the offseason, this felt completely broken. The relationship between Aiyuk and the 49ers looked badly damaged ever since that massive extension. The material points out that a lot of people started treating his departure like the obvious next step, especially after all the contract drama, the guaranteed money fallout, and the hard public tone around his future with the organization. But then Jed York comes out and opens the door with a comment saying anything is possible, and making it clear that if Aiyuk gets healthy, he is still a very good player. And that is where this gets interesting. Does that mean the relationship is suddenly fixed? Not necessarily. Maybe. But it could also mean something else. The team is trying to rebuild market value. And honestly, that makes a whole lot of sense. Because there is a massive difference between trying to move a player everyone thinks is gone anyway, and trying to move a player who can still be framed as someone with real football value. A public comment like that shifts the atmosphere. It does not heal the wound, but it changes the temperature around it. And for the 49ers, that matters because contenders cannot afford to waste assets. If Aiyuk still has a market, even if the return is modest, San Francisco has to maximize that. And if there is somehow a real path to restoring him internally, even better. What they cannot do is let this entire saga turn into pure dead money and zero leverage. At the end of the day, this is bigger than Aiyuk himself. This is about roster management under championship pressure. It is about a franchise that knows the window is open, but also knows that a bad miscalculation right now could cost way too much. And when even a situation this messy is still being repositioned and managed carefully, the message is crystal clear. In Santa Clara, nobody wants to lose flexibility while the title chase is still very much alive. And that is why this week feels so heavy for the faithful. It is not one isolated rumor. It is not one random headline. It is the whole storm cloud forming at once. Pressure on the offensive line, a need to take some weight off McCaffrey, the temptation to make a real splash on defense, the effort to keep from losing outright in a difficult offensive situation. Every road points back to the same truth. The 49ers know the championship window is still open, but they also know that window does not stay open forever. Now comes the part that matters most. Turning reads into action. Because real contenders do not survive on talent alone. They survive on timing, guts, and decisions. So now I want to hear from Niner Nation. Which of these paths helps the title chase the most? And I will tell you this much, plain and simple. If Santa Clara moves with conviction, this team still has very real power to fight its way back to the top of the NFC.